It was raining heavily outside. The skies were shades of gray and the clouds were dense. General Peter Valen took a deep breath of the moist air as his soldiers set up the campsite. "Sir, we've searched the entire village, but all the villagers have evacuated. Only a priest was found in the village's house of worship. We brought him with us and sent out a troop in search for villagers hiding in the forest." "Well done, Major. Bring the priest." "Yes, sir. We were not able to find much provisions except for some holy books and scrolls in the house of worship, but we found the priest carrying these two things. A dagger and a small book was in his pocket." General Valen took the small book in his hands, surprised by the title, Tales of the Monster Slayer. He smirked as the priest was brought forth. "Untie him." "So you write these kinds of books as well. What is your name?" "Gregory Lindholm." "Are you a priest or a storyteller?" "Priests like you create these superstitions to fool the believers to come to you for salvation. You extort them and take advantage of their ignorance." General Valen shook his head as he dropped the book onto the table and took the dagger. Where did a priest of a poor house of God get a dagger like this? "Centuries ago, some holy people came here and built this house of worship. They left behind this jewel. It has remained in their memory in the possession of every priest since." I'm not a godless man. I know if I ask you about your people, you won't tell me. Call them back. They are not in danger and they won't be harmed." "I don't know where they are, but may I have that back? This is a holy relic to us." "You won't be needing this again. You can return to your home." "We thought we would find a lot of provisions after raiding the village." "Leave provisions? We could have at least enjoyed the woman. But there's no one. These people didn't leave behind anything except for some livestock. They couldn't have gone far. Let's keep searching." "Hold on. Is that a cabin? Someone is inside." A few soldiers searching through the forest discovered an old cabin. When they broke down the door, they were surprised to find a lone young woman inside. She was only about 16 years old. Her hair was disarranged, and her clothes were all stained with dirt. "Who wants to go first?" "What? Are you crazy? Do you want to get court-martial?" "Why? What's the problem? Are we going to let her go?" "Is this your first time? First the general will take his share, and then we will get our share." "Let's take her back to camp then." "Sir, we found this girl in the forest." General Valen looked at the girl. "What is your name?" "Catherine." He turned to his soldiers and commanded them, "Set a tent for her and give her a tub of water. Did you find any clothes in the village?" "Yes, sir. We collected a few things from some of the houses." "Make arrangements for her. She's become an animal living in the forest." "You will get clean, cut your hair and nails. I will visit you soon." Catherine nervously followed the soldiers to a tent. She watched quietly as they left her a tub of water, clippers, scissors, and a comb to prepare herself. Later that evening, General Valen went to Catherine's tent. There was a lantern lit inside, and Catherine was sitting on a stool. General Valen was struck in awe seeing her beauty. Her eyes were dazzling, her hair flowing like silk over her shoulders, and her skin glistened in the light of the fire. Seeing him, Catherine stood up. General Valen was mesmerized just by looking at her. "I have no intention to harm you, and I will not let anyone else harm you." With that, he turned and left the tent. Upon seeing him so soon, Major Rolfe was surprised. "Sir, are you not going to spend the night here?" "No, send for the priest tomorrow morning." The next morning, soldiers brought Priest Gregory back to the campsite to meet General Valen. "Here is your holy relic. You can keep it." Gregory took the dagger in his hands. "Thank you for returning this, but I have another request to you." Speak. I heard your soldiers found one of the village girls in the forest. Please let her go. I called you here for her. I told you, I'm a godly man. I'm going to marry her, and you are going to get us married today. Today? Perhaps it is best you wait 2 days and 2 nights before you marry her. According to our beliefs, these are bad nights. The villagers believe these nights have an evil omen. General Valen agreed to Priest Gregory's advice. He was willing to wait the next 2 days. Meanwhile, he arranged a cabin for Catherine's needs and comforts. He would have dinner with her tonight. That evening, when General Valen entered Catherine's room, he sat down across from her at the table. "Enjoy your food," he said, picking up the cutlery. "This fish and fruit is from your village. It's quite good. What other fruits are found here?" Catherine took a morsel in her mouth and wiped her lips with a handkerchief. General Valen couldn't stop looking at her. In the light of the candle, her lips now looked rosy red. "The forests here have many fruit. You'll find apricots and cherries growing abundant here." "What were you doing in the forest? In that cabin?" "I had gone there to hide." "Do you have any family?" "My mother passed away when I was young." "And your father and siblings?" "I don't have any siblings, and I don't know where my father is." General Valen could not take his eyes off of Catherine as she spoke softly to him, answering his every question. The more he spent time with her, the more eager he became for these 2 days and 2 nights to pass. The next day, the skies had cleared out a bit. In the afternoon, General Valen went to visit Catherine again, finding her braiding her long, luscious hair. "I've brought those apricots and cherries for you," he said, placing the basket on the table. Catherine turned to look at him. Her eyes were beautiful in the few rays of sunlight that seeped through the curtains. "Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to have?" "No, I have everything I need. I asked you not of what you need, but of what you want. Perhaps to go by the river?" General Valen took Catherine to the riverside as she pleased. He sat there watching her walk bare feet in the grass as the wind made her long gown sway side to side. "Don't take what's fallen to the ground. I'll bring down the flowers for you." "That's all right. The flowers are up quite high. Don't worry about it." As General Valen spoke to Catherine, he was enchanted by her beauty even more. The next evening, General Valen visited Catherine, but he didn't intend to spend much time with her tonight. "Catherine, you know your village is now nomad land under my authority. You know I have many soldiers here, and in times like this, a young woman like you is vulnerable. But if I marry you, you'll be safe. I would offer you a ring for the marriage, but I don't have a ring. I brought this perfume of mine as a bridal gift for you. I've called a priest from your village. He will get us married tomorrow." Catherine silently listened to General Valen. He placed the perfume on her table and left. That night, as he lay in bed, he had a hard time sleeping, thinking of the next day. 2 days had passed by rather fast. As he tossed and turned, he suddenly noticed a book he had taken from the priest and decided to read it. Many years ago, in a small town, there lived a man who was known as the Monster Slayer. He was the bravest of all the men, fighting to seek vengeance from the monsters that took the life of his wife. His arrows never missed, and his sword was never defeated. Wherever there was danger, the people could think of none other than the man they called the Monster Slayer. He had been a savior to his people, a hope in times of fear. But one cold winter night, among all the frightening nights, the people were struck in awe seeing the man hang up his sword. They questioned him in dread. Why was he breaking his arrows? But he only looked at them with misery in his eyes. The morning of the 3rd day, General Valen ordered for deer to be hunted. Today, everyone would feast in celebration for his wedding. "I told you we had a chance to have her at the cabin. Major Rolf, what will happen to us? We thought we would enjoy." "Don't worry, you'll soon forget her. A soldier's heart never yearns for one woman." General Valen sent his soldiers to bring Priest Gregory for the marriage ceremony. He prepared many gifts for him and his soon-to-be bride. Unfortunately, the rain had been pouring since dawn and the roads were slippery and muddy. Nevertheless, the soldiers set out, but after searching the whole day, they were unable to find the priest. "Sir, we've searched everywhere. The priest is not in the village." What? General Valen had been waiting desperately for this day. Did this priest think he could fool him? He had yet to see what Valen was capable of. "Go and search every inch of the forest." All of a sudden, some of the soldiers called out from the distance, "He's here!" It was Priest Gregory. "Where were you?" "It was raining so heavily today, my house became flooded. I went to find shelter elsewhere. I had given you my word, so when the rain stopped, I made my way here." "Very well. You may commence the marriage ceremony." After the marriage ceremony, General Valen called to speak with Priest Gregory again. "I read your book. It's really good, but the last few pages are missing." "Yes, I haven't written them yet. When I'll complete the story, I'll sew the pages inside." General Valen returned the book back to Gregory. "You may take it then, but you must give me a copy when you're done writing." After a long wait, General Valen would finally have what he wanted tonight. But that evening, when he went to Catherine, he found her sitting to the corner of the bed, looking nervous. He began to speak to her, wanting her to relax. "Tonight is a special night, Catherine." But despite his efforts to calm her, General Valen watched as drops of sweat began to trickle down Catherine's forehead. He took out his handkerchief and placed it in her hands. "It rained all day today, but it seems that the clouds are finally clearing out. Maybe we can watch the stars together," he said as he opened the windows to let in the cool air. That's when he suddenly caught sight of the moon starting to appear through the wispy clouds. "How beautiful. We couldn't see the moon this whole time because of the clouds. Come, sit with me." General Valen turned and stretched forth his hand to Catherine. When she suddenly moved back, she began breathing heavily as her eyes began to develop a yellowish hue. "Are you feeling sick?" General Valen asked, worried. But the second he stretched out his hand to get hold of her, Catherine jumped up. General Valen was horrified, staring at a vicious creature. Hearing the screams of General Valen, his soldiers rushed to the cabin. Horrified to see this vicious beast, they began shooting at it, attempting to get to their general, but all efforts were futile as the creature pounced onto them. General Valen crunched in pain, hearing the cries of his soldiers, when suddenly he heard a familiar voice outside. It was Priest Gregory, and in his hands was the dagger. Priest Gregory walked up to Catherine, holding the dagger in front of him. "Calm down. Stop. These are not your meal." Upon seeing the dagger, Catherine suddenly backed away, whimpering as she followed Priest Gregory into the cabin. He walked up to General Valen, now laying in a pool of red. "Didn't you want to know why the man hangs up his sword and breaks his arrows? Perhaps before you die, I'll share with you how the story ends." The monster slayer spent his years traveling far and wide, hunting down the vicious beast who had once taken the life of his beloved, until he came to a town where the people said they knew of a beast who ravaged their farmlands. The monster slayer hunted down many. The one he was searching for was amongst his own. Sneaking through the lands, feasting on the cattle, the monster slayer had him at his mercy. The vicious beast came to bargain. "Don't do this. No one turns into a monster willingly. I have no fault in this." But the monster slayer knew no mercy for the one he called the wicked beast. "Monsters are monsters." The man shouted out, seeing his sword. "I knew you wouldn't spare me, but what will you do to your daughter?" "What about my daughter?" The man cried as he spoke his last words. "You'll come to realize what you've done on the next full moon." And so, the monster slayer waited till the next full moon, filled with dread to discover this monster had infected his daughter. He went to the town's priest, seeking help, who brought out a dagger to subdue the monster. But seeing the misery in her eyes, the man could not take the life of one of his own. From that day, he hung up his sword and broke his arrows and turned to a life of worship as a priest. The villagers respected him, knowing he was a good man. He had always protected them. He arranged his daughter a place to stay in the forest, subduing her with the dagger. And the villagers too assisted him, taking a goat into the forest on the day of the full moon, leaving behind an offering. "Let's go, daughter. Your meal is waiting." After a rough day at work, Josephine returned home to find her son had fallen asleep waiting for her. She sighed as she stepped into the kitchen and opened the pantry. There was barely anything. The bills were stacking up on the table, and she and Robert hadn't even managed the rent this month. "Mom, I'm hungry." "Liam, just a while longer, sweetheart. Your dad will be here with the groceries soon." That night, after Robert returned home, barely managing to buy some groceries, Josephine stirred up some cabbage stew for dinner. "I don't know how long I'll be able to hold on to this job, Josephine." "Did something happen at work?" "There's been a budget cut. They're firing people." "What are we going to do, Robert? Things can't go on like this. I'm barely making anything at my job." "That's why I've been thinking, Josephine. Why don't you visit your Uncle Jeffrey? He doesn't have anyone. He might just help us out." "Uncle Jeffrey? Have you lost your mind? You know how he is. He's so strange, and you know the rumors that go on in the family about him. They say he died but somehow came back to life, and since then, anyone who's ever kept relations with him passed away." "Josephine, think about our situation. Your uncle has no other relative except for you. Maybe if you take care of him in this old age and keep good relations with him, he might give you a share of the inheritance. Even if he writes a small part of the inheritance to you, we wouldn't have to worry about anything." Jeffrey Rutherford was a distant maternal uncle of Josephine. Uncle Jeffrey never got married, and even though he was rich, all other family members had always avoided him because of his eccentric nature. And he lived his whole life alone in his mansion, and now was an old man. But perhaps Robert was right. Josephine was the last member in the family, and maybe her Uncle Jeffrey might just help her out. Still reluctantly, the next day, Josephine traveled across town to visit him. The Rutherford mansion was at the far end of town, away from Populous by nearly an hour. She felt a strange chill staring at the mansion that stretched over acres of land. She wondered how her uncle would react seeing her after so long. There weren't any guards by the gate, so Josephine went inside and walked to the mansion. A while into knocking, an old man opened the door. "May I help you?" "I'm Josephine Rutherford. Mr. Jeffrey Rutherford is my uncle." "Come in." Stepping inside, Josephine stared at the tall ceilings, the decor. She could hear each and every footstep echo. "Sir Rutherford, you have a visitor." Her uncle turned around in his wheelchair to spot Josephine, when suddenly a smile appeared on his face. "You must be Josephine. Wilma's daughter. You look just like your mother." Come, take a seat. Josephine sat down as her uncle sighed, looking at her. Finally, one of you decided to think of me as family. It's not like that, Uncle. I've been thinking of visiting you, but I've been so overwhelmed at home with my husband and my son. I understand. The last time I saw you was at your mother's funeral. You know, your mother and I were very close. Yes, Uncle, she used to tell me about you. How are you doing? I heard your health hasn't been well. It's not the health I can't take, my dear. It's the loneliness. The entire family stays away from me. Can you tell me why? And these days, it's hard to find anyone that wants to stay at the mansion. Even the caretaker leaves at night. Don't worry, Uncle. After today, you won't have to be alone. No, dear, I don't want to burden you. No, Uncle. It's the least I can do. If Mother were here, she would have done the same. Josephine was quite surprised to find her uncle rather welcoming. She had always thought him of strange, but never considered how he must have felt. So from then on, she began visiting the mansion and taking care of him. And soon, when her uncle got to know about her situation, he started helping her too. But Josephine always came alone and never brought Robert or Liam to the mansion. Every morning, Josephine would open up the windows and draw the curtains to brighten up the dark and gloomy mansion. Good morning, my dear. The weather is soothing out today, Uncle. I was thinking perhaps we could take a stroll in the garden. Sounds wonderful. A distance behind the old mansion, Josephine spotted the small graveyard. Uncle, is that the Rutherford mausoleum? Yes, dear. For the past 400 years, every member of the Rutherford family has been buried there. But the graveyard extends on. Now and then, I allow the poor to bury their deceased. As Josephine strolled down the path, she stopped near the mausoleum. Your mother's grave is here. Yes, I've heard. I was hoping someday I would visit. Perhaps soon, it will be my time as well. No, Uncle, I'm sure you'll live a long life. Many wish for a long life, but sometimes a long life can be a curse. Uncle Rutherford pointed at an engraved portrait on the mausoleum walls. This is my great-great-great-grandfather, Sir Carlisle Rutherford. He was a colonial officer. He came here from Spain in the 1700s. It was him who built this mansion, got married and raised his family here. But now, this mansion lays empty. Haven't you ever thought of getting married? Uncle Geoffrey chuckled as he swirled around the ring on his finger. No, I've been better off by myself. Josephine fell quiet, not knowing what to say. All of a sudden, the rain began to pour. She quickly turned the wheelchair around and hurried back to the mansion. Returning inside, Josephine started up the fireplace and got towels for her uncle. She noticed him suddenly fall weak and began to cough. I'll make you some soup. I hope you don't catch a cold. That evening, Josephine cooked up dinner and brought it to her uncle. She tried keeping the room warm and brought him extra blankets, but as the night passed, her uncle fell even more sick. Uncle, shall I call over a doctor? No, don't worry about me, dear. Just take me to my bed. After shifting Uncle Geoffrey into the room, Josephine anxiously watched the man in pain. Feebly, he said to her, "Lock the door on your way out." "But uncle, you're not doing so well. How will I check on you? I'm going to stay the night here. I can't leave you like this." No, I'll be all right. You go home. Your family must be waiting for you." "But uncle." "I'll be fine, my dear. Go home." Surprised by her uncle's tone, Josephine didn't argue and bid him farewell. But on her way back, she felt awfully guilty and worried. What if something bad was to happen? What if he needed help? The servant wasn't even home. When Josephine returned home late that night, Robert sensed something wasn't right. "Is everything okay? My uncle fell sick this evening. He wasn't in a good condition. Maybe he won't make it tonight." "Then why did you return home? You should have stayed with him." "I wanted to, but he wouldn't allow me." "Well, I hope he'll be fine. I'm going to go back early tomorrow morning." The night passed by rather anxiously. And the first thing the next morning, Josephine got ready and hurried back to the mansion. As she walked down the hall to her uncle's chamber, she let out a deep breath before she slowly unlocked the door. "Good morning, my dear. You're here early. I was actually waiting for you." "Uncle, you're better. I was so worried leaving you like that last night." "I told you I would be fine." Josephine was rather shocked to see the change in her uncle's stature. The dark circles under his eyes were gone. His skin no longer looked pale. It was as if he were never ill. Like every morning, she took her uncle for a stroll in the garden and cleaned up the mansion and cooked his meals. Uncle Jeffrey was indeed a strange man. Much of the day would go by in which he would spend in the grand hall, staring at the portraits of his late family members. Sometimes Josephine would watch him staring into his ring. The man wore 2 strange rings on the same finger. The jewels seemed familiar, but Josephine couldn't point out where she had seen them before. Perhaps a family heirloom, a close memory. But of all the strange reclusive things about her uncle, there was one thing Josephine found quite bizarre. Every evening, her uncle's health would begin to worsen to the point where Josephine would see no way but to call a doctor. He would become so sick that he wouldn't even be able to pour himself a glass of water. But even in that state, he wouldn't take any medication, he wouldn't allow any doctors to the mansion, and on his insistence, Josephine would leave him in that state. He wouldn't allow her or even the servant to stay behind. But surprising as it was, the next morning when she would return, her uncle would be completely fine. And this happened a number of times. The matter was awfully strange, and considering how stubbornly her uncle asked her to leave every night, started to stir up Josephine's curiosity. How did her uncle recover so fast? So one of those nights, when her uncle fell tremendously ill, Josephine locked up the room and left. But she stayed in the mansion that night. She would check up on him. In the first hour, she heard him cough and stir in bed. But a while later, everything fell silent. Had he fallen asleep? Around 1 a.m., Josephine got the keys and slowly went to her uncle's chamber. Without making the slightest noise, she turned the lock around and opened the door. But to her shock, she found the room empty, the wheelchair beside his bed. A cool breeze blew in through the window as the curtains fluttered in the air. Just as Josephine took another step, she froze, seeing a figure climb onto the sill. A man stepped inside, his eyes glowing, his body like no man she had seen before. "Uncle? You shouldn't have pride, my dear." The next evening, Robert noticed a car from the Rutherford mansion drive to a stop in front of the house. It was Josephine. "Josephine, is everything all right? I thought your uncle's health must have worsened, so you stayed over last night." "Uncle Rutherford is no more. We can live in the mansion from now on. He has left everything to me." "But what about your uncle? Have you made arrangements for his funeral?" "Yes. He was buried in the family mausoleum. We can move in tomorrow." After the death of Jeffrey Rutherford, Robert, Josephine, and their son moved into the mansion. But Josephine was no longer how she used to be. It was like she was a different person. She rarely spoke to Robert, and now they stayed in separate rooms. It was as if Robert and Liam were living under a shelter rather than in their home. "This is your room, and that will be Liam's room. You can stay here as long as you live. As for your expenses and the child's education, I'll provide for that. But let one thing be straight, never come to my room." Robert stared at his wife as she sternly spoke to him. "Josephine, what has gotten into you? I'm your husband." "No, you got what you wanted." Robert watched as Josephine walked down the hall. It was true. He had gotten what he wanted. He had gotten the wealth and property, but he had lost Josephine. Centuries ago, when Sir Carlisle Rutherford first traveled here from Spain, on his journey across the sea, the ship had gotten lost. For months the crew drifted, not knowing where they were, and soon many of them began to die. In this dire situation, Carlisle and some others had to take extreme inhumane measures to stay alive. "You men, you're lustful for life. I curse you with immortality, but as long as you live, you shall feast on human flesh." Eventually, Carlisle survived the journey and arrived to the Americas, settling here in Vermont. But something about him had changed. Every night, he woke up feeling extreme hunger. And in his urge, he went out to the graveyard and feasted. Carlisle had been cursed, and this was how he had been alive for ages. Whenever a member of the family passed away, he feasted upon them. and every few generations, he changed his body and continued to live. However, after centuries like this, just when Carlyle had thought his lineage had ended with Geoffrey Rutherford, he met his distant niece. Josephine had come here in hopes of inheriting the mansion, while, all this time, Carlyle too had been in hopes of inheriting a new body. I know how it will stop. It had been nearly 6 years since Ryan visited back home in Wazuka, Japan. Ever since he had moved out for college and traveled to America, he had kept his distance from his father. Even as a child, Ryan had always been a little detached from him, as his father was a rather strange and peculiar man. He always had an odd fascination with cats, and since Ryan had left, his father was living all alone in this bungalow, perhaps with the old servant, Ito-san, in whose care Ryan had grown up. If it were not for the letter Ryan had recently gotten from home, he wouldn't have made this journey. His father had been ill for some time, and with his deteriorating health, he wished to meet Ryan. It was a long flight from New York to Japan, and then a long drive from the city to the small mountain town of Wazuka. Ryan reached the Okasaki bungalow and parked the car. Almost instantly, he spotted Ito-san hurrying out the door. "Okasaki-kun, finally, you're here." "Ito-san, how many times will I tell you? Call me Ryan. It's been so long since you left. Let's go in, let me help you with your bags." As Ryan and Ito grabbed the bags from the trunk, he was a little startled seeing a cat brush past his leg. "Haven't seen this one before. Father has still been keeping these cats?" "You know how he is. They keep him company. Master Okasaki has been alone since..." Ito let out a deep breath, lost in his reminiscence. He then smiled and patted Ryan on the back. "He's waiting for you." Entering the old bungalow again, Ryan stared at the familiar decor. The old lanterns still hung in their place, the paintings where they had always been. Ryan climbed the stairs and slowly looked into his father's room. He sighed as yet another cat slipped out the door. He could see his father sitting by the window. Hearing the door slide open, Haruto Okasaki turned slowly in much relief to see his son. "Ryan, I'm glad you came." Ryan walked towards him. He could see his father was no longer the man he used to be before. His body had shrunken, dark circles under his eyes. He looked much pale. "Come, sit with me. How are things in America?" "Everything is fine. I heard you got engaged. You didn't bring her?" "No, father. The trip was so sudden. Leave that. How are you feeling?" "Son, I probably will not live much longer. Have the doctors visited?" "And what will the doctors do? When the time is here, there is no preventing it." Ryan silently listened, He knew there was no use talking to his father about anything. He had always had the strangest beliefs. When I die, do not let my body be buried in the cemetery. He looked out into the backyard. I have made a burial vault behind the bungalow. Place me there and bring a monk to do the funeral ritual for 6 consecutive nights before you secure it forever, so I can rest in peace alone. Ryan looked out in bewilderment. Had this man gone mad? He had dug his own grave behind the house? Father, it's 1980, and you still believe in all this? Promise me you will do as I say. Looking into his sullen eyes, Ryan said, "Yes, Father." The first night at the bungalow, Ryan walked out to the patio to catch some air. The weather was mildly cold in Wazuka. The backyard had been covered in a deep, foggy mist. "Ryan, how is everything over there?" "It's all right, but Father's not doing too well. He hasn't seen a doctor and he probably won't. Maybe you can make some arrangements." "Yeah, I was thinking tomorrow. What about you? Are you okay?" "Yeah, just missing you." As Ryan spoke to Anna, Ito walked out. "Okasaki-kun, your dinner has been served. I'll be in a while." After a walk in the backyard and speaking with Anna, Ryan returned inside. As he sat down at the chabudai, he stared at the sukiyaki and miso soup just like he used to have when he was a boy. Ryan had his dinner and went straight to bed, planning the next day. He fell asleep quite fast, but towards dawn, he heard a sudden knock on his door. He woke up startled and opened to see it was Ito, a look of dread on his face as he held the lantern. "Is everything all right? Your father, Master Okasaki, is no more." Haruto Okasaki had passed away in his sleep. Despite how odd their relationship had always been, Ryan felt heavy-hearted. Early that morning, he arranged for the funeral. As his father had requested, a monk had been brought to perform his rites, and Haruto Okasaki was placed in the burial vault out in the woods behind his bungalow. A storm is nearing. This isn't a good sign. We must leave. It was in the middle of the ritual. The monk had suddenly looked up to the skies, hearing the thunder. He looked frightened by something. What sign? It's held inauspicious if a storm begins during a funeral. It presages evil. These superstitions, Ryan murmured. But when the rain began to pour and the winds picked up, they didn't have a choice but to leave. After a long day, when Ryan returned home, he found his room empty. As he was about to call Ito, the old man hurried to him. "Where are my things?" "I shifted your things to your father's room." "Why? There was no need for that. With your father no more, you are now the master, Okasaki-kun." Reluctant, yet exhausted, Ryan nodded as he went up to his father's bedroom. Laying down on the bed, he listened to the pitter-patter of the rain and the thunder roaring ever so often. Once these 6 days were over, he would return home, he thought, as he drifted off. "No, I can't take it. I can't take it. Father?" "Ryan, sacrifice the cat. Relieve me from this misery. Sacrifice the cat." Ryan woke up startled, his heart pacing rapidly. What a dream. Drinking a glass of water, he tried to forget and go back to sleep. but he lay awake the whole night. The next day, the weather had only worsened, and the monk refused to come to the Okazaki bungalow, although the funeral ritual had to be held. Ryan eventually had to put it aside, planning to complete whatever had to be done once the storm subsided. The second night, as Ryan tried to get some rest, he woke up again to the same dream. Why am I seeing this? Again, supposing his mind had been stressed with all that had happened in these past days. The next morning, Ryan went to his father's study, looking around, pondering on the nightmares. Could there really be any meaning, or was he being delusional as well? Looking through the shelves, Ryan skimmed through his father's collection. Shoo. Reaching his table, he opened up the drawers. There was a dagger inside one of them. As he checked it out, he noticed some jars inside. What is this? In it were sharp and pointed pearls. Looking closely, Ryan suddenly put it down, realizing they were cat's teeth. He moved on through the books on the table, when he noticed a bookmark kept in one. He opened it up to see a strange picture of a cat. The book looked ancient. The Kasha, a cat yokai, an entity, a spirit that appears upon death, bringing on harsh lightning and rain, a storm that will not end till it has taken what it has come for. It torments the dead for the evil deeds it had done, taking with it the soul that is damned to hell. Nonsense. Ryan closed the book. He had enough of this. It was partly the reason he had to leave this house, leave his father. He spent much of the day trying to relieve his mind. However, again, when night fell and he tried to sleep, he saw the same dream, saw his father in that condition, pleading to him. Sacrifice the cat. Relieve me from this misery. Sacrifice the cat. This time, Ryan couldn't rid the anxiety. What is happening to me? Ryan turned startled to a meow of a cat in the room. He stared at it, suddenly realizing the matter. The storm had started that day. The monk had sensed something. He didn't complete the ritual, and the storm, it hasn't stopped in 4 days. The legend, the Kasha, the jar, the nightmares, it had to have some meaning. Was his father being tormented? Maybe, if the cat is sacrificed, he would be spared from this entity. That night, in his anxiety, Ryan went to his father's study and took out the dagger from the drawer. As his heart raced, he caught the cat and left the house. If this would bring an end to whatever had started, he had to do so. He walked straight towards the woods, where was the burial vault. The cat wrung in his hands, but Ryan held on tight. However, just as he was to enter the woods, he suddenly heard a sound. He saw a flash of light glimmer before he realized there stood something ahead of him. The Kasha? Where are you going? To relieve my father. To relieve a sinner? A killer? Ryan froze as those fiery eyes stared into his. This couldn't be real. This had to be a hallucination. Do you know who your father killed? Look into my eyes, Ryan. Look. Mother? It was nearly 30 years ago when Haruto Okazaki had met Eloise Williams. She was a foreigner and had settled with her family in Japan due to her father's business. Eloise and Haruto fell in love and soon got married. 2 years into their marriage, they had their son Ryan and were living a happy life. Mother, this is spicy. Sukiyaki and miso soup. Drink up, Ryan, it's good for you. The first time you had this, you had gone red from the spice, Eloise. Their little family was perfect, but as the initial years passed by, Eloise started to notice some things about Haruto. He had caught on to drinking and often would misbehave in his sudden fits of rage. Haruto, this is getting out of hand. It's affecting your health, our lives. Have I not given you enough? What more do you want? Haruto, I want you to stop this. It was one night when Eloise tried to speak him out of his horrible habits. Things became heated, and Eloise became a victim to Haruto's rage. When Haruto returned to his senses, he was grieved by what he had done. But making it seem as an accident, he covered up his deed. However, it was since then that the guilt began to torment him, and in fear of what he would have to face in his afterlife, he turned to pleasing the Kasha. Every year he would raise and care the cats himself, only to sacrifice them to Kasha as a means of protection for himself of his evil doing. Everything flashed before his eyes as Ryan endured the memories. Your father is a sinner. As he returned to his senses, he looked around. He was alone. He looked at the cat in his arms, wringing to escape. He stared far out to where his father lay. After what he had done, he didn't deserve this. Ryan let the cat go as it ran off into the woods. Enjoy your misery. It was the middle of spring in Los Angeles, California. The breeze was moist, and the skies had been dark and cloudy all day. Alas, the long-awaited rain began to pour sometime late in the afternoon. After his class, Professor Conroy wrapped up on his day at the university. He stood under the shade, opening his umbrella. The streets were empty, and the weather perfect to enjoy a walk home. But as he stepped into the heavy raindrops, he heard a voice behind him. "Are you Professor Henry Conroy?" Professor Conroy turned around to see a young woman soaking in a raincoat. "Yes, I am. And you are?" "Hello, I'm Erica Hill. I wanted to consult you about something. Do you want to speak here in the rain, or would you prefer a place where everything is a little more dry and cozy?" "Yeah, sure. Then let's go back to my office." Professor Conroy escorted Erica inside to the 3rd floor of the university. "Professor, you're back? I'll be a while longer. Would you please send 2 cups of coffee to my office?" "Sure, Professor." Professor Conroy hung up his umbrella, while Erica too took off her wet raincoat and took a seat. In just moments, his assistant dropped by with coffee. "Thank you, Bella. The weather today is perfect for a hot cup of coffee." "Thank you, Professor. So tell me, how is everything?" "I really don't know how to explain what I've been going through. Everyone finds it difficult to believe the things that have happened in my life. I'm afraid if I tell you, you might also misunderstand me." You might start to think I'm insane, just like everyone else. But from what I've heard about you, it felt like you were the only person who would understand. That's why I've come all the way here. Don't worry about anything. Without any fear of judgment, relax and just open up. Speak your mind. Everyone thinks I've become mentally insane. They can't trust me, my relatives, my friends, and now even my husband. But I know I'm not insane. No matter how much I've tried to explain, no one wants to believe that I see someone. I have a protector that looks just like me. I know it's not in my mind. She's real. I've seen her. Your protector? Someone that looks just like you? Like your twin sister? No, Professor. At one point, I assumed the same. But when I asked my parents, they assured me that I never had a twin sister. I'm their only child. When do you see her? Whenever I'm in trouble. And when did this all start? It was almost 15 years ago. My parents and I had gone to our family farmhouse in Silverton, Oregon for a family reunion. I was 11 at the time, and I had grown up in the city my entire life. When I got there, I saw how different everything was. It was acres and acres of cornfields, woods, and farm animals. Hey there, Erica. You've sure grown up a lot. I'm Uncle Gus. Remember me? Not really, but hello, Uncle Gus. How about I take you out to the old barn house? There's a waterfall over there. You've probably never been to a place like that before. Waterfall? Cool, okay. Uncle Gus was a distant relative of mine. I had heard of him before, but that was the first time we actually met. I followed him across the field into the woods, where we stopped at the old cabin. But after we got there, I realized he took me there with far different intentions. This cabin is the best place to spend alone time. You can't hear anyone, and no one can hear you. Why are you locking the door? I want to go back. How about we play a little game first? When he advanced towards me, I didn't know what to do. I tried to push him, but he threw me onto the ground. I thought I would never escape from there. But then, I heard a noise from outside the cabin. All of a sudden, she broke the door open and came inside. I'll never forget what I saw. She was exactly like me. The hair, the eyes, the clothes. She picked up one of the logs and hit Gus on the head, while I ran away. What happened to your uncle after that? When I returned, I told my parents what he tried to do, about the girl that looked just like me, and everything that happened, but they hardly believed me. They went to see the matter and found Uncle Gus had been badly injured in the cabin. He told them that he had only brought me there to show me around, and I heard him like that. I kept telling everyone it wasn't me, but her, the girl that looked like me. But Uncle Gus said there wasn't anyone else there. Is this the only time you saw her? No, I saw her again, in my freshman year in college, almost 7 years later. I had joined the track team, and after my usual training session, I usually freshened up in the locker room. But that day, I noticed a few other students had been talking about me behind their back. While I was in the locker room, they suddenly all cornered me. Jessica? She's right there. That's her. So Ron was staring at you on the field. You think you're pretty? What? I don't know what you guys are talking about. Really? Maybe we can make you understand how not to steal someone's boyfriend. Alexa, you have a trimmer, don't you? This girl has such nice hair. I'd like to have a lock. You guys are misunderstanding. I didn't do anything. They had nearly caught hold of me when I heard someone suddenly banging on all the lockers from behind. It was her. She stormed in and started a fight with the girls. She didn't spare a single one of them. And this time also, only you saw her. What did they see? Did they see your protector, guardian? No, they wouldn't admit it. The authorities came in when they heard the noise. They found the bathroom stalls broken and the girls injured. But when they asked them, they said that they were just joking around with me when I started the fight, and in the process, everything got damaged. What happened after that? I didn't see her for the rest of my college years, but it was rather recently, almost a year back, on the night of my wedding. She visited me. My family and my in-laws had booked a hotel for the wedding, and I was in my room getting ready for the ceremony. It happened sometime in the evening. I was sitting by the dressing table when the lights all went off, and I suddenly saw her reflection in the mirror. When I turned around, she was right there, standing in front of me, staring right at me. Who are you? Why do you look just like me? You're so happy, aren't you? You're going to trust someone else with your life? What do you want from me? Nothing. I won't meet you ever again. All of a sudden, it felt as if everything flashed before my eyes, and I fainted. What happened, Erica? She was here. I saw her. I saw her again. But she was gone. Did you lose consciousness every time you saw her? The first time I fainted after I ran away from the cabin. The second time I suddenly blacked out. And the third time I fainted seeing this light. Was that the last time you saw her then? I thought I would never see her. I thought she was gone for good, but I saw her again. After my marriage to Joshua, we moved to a nice, peaceful neighborhood in San Francisco. Everything about that place, our new house, was perfect, except for our neighbor, Simon. The first time we met him was when he came to welcome us when we moved in. Hello, I'm Simon Garrett, your neighbor. Nice to meet you. I'm Joshua, and my wife Erica, she's actually busy with everything. As you can see, we still have a lot of work left. How about I help you out? The more hands, the better. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Over time, Joshua and Simon became good friends. He invited him over on game nights to barbecues for a drink. But I never liked Simon, because I would often spot him staring at me. And when Joshua wouldn't be home, Simon would often come over to the house for no apparent reason. Hello, Erica. I hope I didn't bother you. That's alright, but Josh isn't back from work yet. Oh, no, I wasn't here to meet him. I just wanted to ask you if it's alright if I use your hose. My one got damaged and Yeah, sure. I tried to avoid speaking to him too much, and for the most part, I was busy with my own life. I'm a teacher at the local elementary school, and I'm usually not home until 5 o'clock. And Joshua returns home within a few hours of me returning. Everything was going fine, but it was one day that Joshua told me he would be going on a business trip out of state. Do you really have to go? You know how many creeps are in this neighborhood. Creeps? Sweetheart, this is the best neighborhood we can live in. It's safe here. I don't think so. What creep? Are you talking about Simon? I know he's a little eccentric, but he's not a creep. He's my buddy. Well, I don't like your buddy. And as I expected, while Joshua was away, Simon came over to the house again. This time, quite late in the evening. Simon, Joshua's not home. He won't be back till tomorrow. Yeah, I know. I just came to return some supplies I borrowed from him. It's pretty heavy. May I come in? You can leave them out. No, I don't think you should leave these out. It might rain, or it might even get stolen. Let me just drop it in. It'll save you the hassle. I was reluctant, but Simon kept on insisting, so I allowed him in. When he started staring at me again, I got a bad feeling. And I stayed in my kitchen where all the knives were just in case. Fortunately, Simon just left that evening. I was relieved, and I went on with my chores and my housework. But later that night, when I had gone to bed, I heard a noise from downstairs. When I hurried out, I was horrified to see Simon in the house. He had broken in through the back door. Simon, no, don't do this. I just wanted to see if you were okay. I felt like my heart would leap out of my chest when he stepped towards me. but that's when she showed up again. She threw him onto the ground. I called the police immediately and informed Joshua what happened. But by the time the police arrived, she was gone and Simon was badly injured. His arm dislocated. He had bruises on his head. Neither did the police nor Joshua believe me when he returned the next day. What happened? Joshua, you told me to return the supplies, so I came this evening and gave the box to Erica, and then I left. But a few hours late into the night, I started hearing a sound as if someone were screaming. So I came here to check if Erica was alright. When she didn't open the door, I thought something had happened, and I got in through the back door. That's when she attacked me like this. When Joshua came home from the hospital, he didn't believe a word I said. No, it wasn't me. He broke into the house. He tried to take advantage of me. That's when that girl came. She looks just like me, but she's not me. I'm not her. Erica, that's enough. You have to stop making up these stories. Now, not only my parents, my relatives, say I'm mad, but even my husband thinks I've gone insane. He doesn't trust a word I say, and our relationship is only getting worse. I don't know what to do anymore. What is happening with me? Professor Conroy looked at Erica for a while. Nothing. None of this really happened. There is no protector. Your friends, your family, your husband, all these people are right to disbelieve in your stories. These are but a falsified version of what might have really happened. Stories you concocted in your mind because you have gone mad. No, I'm saying the truth. All this did happen. Erica, you know it didn't happen. Maybe your uncle didn't do anything that day. He really did just want to show you around, but you misunderstood him and blamed him for something he didn't do. Maybe that neighbor did only come to return something, but you intentionally lured him to the house so you could blame him because of your suspicious nature, that people are always conspiring against you, when they're really not. In fact, your husband has all the right to fear you. You've gone mad. You are insane. Who knows who you might harm, who you might blame through your absurd stories? No, I love my husband. I never harmed anyone in my life. I didn't do anything. As Erica anxiously tried to speak in her defense. All of a sudden, she and Professor Conroy heard a strange laughter from outside the office room. The door slowly creaked open. And she walked in, taking a seat right next to Erica. It was her. Click on the subscribe button and check out more awesome videos on our channel. And don't forget to press the bell icon because you know it's interesting.